the level of injustice and racism and just blatant disrespect has reached for me a supersaturation point. I remember, beloved, all of the expressions: fired up, won't take no more. No justice, no peace. All of the things that we would say in the midst of our struggle. And I am also reminded of how many times the struggle has shifted. And that means, beloved, that we have changed leadership on any number of occasions. And it seems that one thing remains fairly constant throughout all of this. And that is that with the changes we see, and by the way, Brother Floyd's murder is something that all of us are familiar with. I came to Abyssinian in 1972. In 1976, Robert Torsney, police officer here in New York City, shot point blank in the face 15-year-old Randy Evans. Now, I need to let that sink in for a minute. It was on Thanksgiving Day, and young Randy Evans was standing, not doing really anything, just happened to ask a question. And the police officer turned instantly and shot him point blank in the face. This is 1976. Robert Torsney was tried, and he was committed because of insanity for a few months to an asylum. But he was released shortly thereafter, and he was diagnosed with some disease that was never heard of before and hadn't been heard of since. Robert Torsney. And Michael Stewart, he was a young artist, graffiti, and he was killed by the police. I remember attending his funeral at the Emmanuel Baptist Church in Brooklyn. The pastor of the church at the time has now made his transition. But I remember how we all gathered and how brokenhearted his mother was, perhaps still is, about the tragedy, and the officers, of course, were not convicted. I want to call for you, and promise to move on from this quickly, the names of several names you know, and their last words, or upon many of their last words. Trayvon Martin, why are you following me? Renisha McBride, I want to go home. Troy Davis, continue to fight this fight. Kendrick McDade, why did you shoot me? Lena Baker, I'm one in a number. Mike Brown, Ferguson, don't shoot. John Crawford, this can't be real. Chantel Davis, I don't want to die. Amadou Diallo, Mom, I'm going to college. Eric Gardner, I can't breathe. Tanisha Anderson, Mama. And Kimani Gray, please don't let me die. I've got another list here, beloved, of women, all women. Charlena Lyles, Deborah Danner, Michelle Cousseau, Rika Boyd, Ayanna Stanley Jones, and all of these women were shot or killed by police officers who had been called because people feared for these women's lives. They were considered to be perhaps mentally challenged, and they are all dead. And Deborah Dana, fatally shot in her Bronx apartment in 2016, the 66-year-old's neighbors reported her for acting irrationally. These are the kinds of things. Rika Boyd, fatally shot in 2012 by an off-duty Chicago detective with an unregistered gun. The officer was charged, but those charges were later dismissed. Ayanna Stanley Jones, a 7-year-old Detroit girl, fatally shot by an officer in 2010 as she slept on the couch of her home. The officer was charged, but after 2 mistrials, a judge dismissed the case. I brought that along, beloved, just to tell you that the list is much longer, much, much longer. But I wanted you to hear just a few names to understand what we're faced with. So for nearly, and our brother Stevenson, Brian, built a beautiful museum in Alabama. The point was to show you how many people were lynched during a terrible era in the history of the United States of America. Many of you have been there, and it's frightening, isn't it, to see above you those stones hanging to remind you of how black men and women were lynched. And what was the killing of Brother Floyd? Simply another style of lynching.